Hi everyone, it's Alice, and today we're gonna wrap up everything I read in September. I've dived headfirst into autumn reading this month because obviously, and even though I never have as much time to read as I would like, I'd say that I got through a pretty sizable stack, and most importantly, I really enjoyed reading this month. I just love autumn reading so much. It's the best. Let's get into the books though. The first one that I read was finally Starling House by Alix E. Harrow. This is like a horror mystery type of thing with some supernatural elements, and the story is set in the small town called Eden, which is kind of run down. And in this town there is this huge mansion, and everybody in town just agrees that there's something really off about this house, and no one goes near it. And our main character knows not to go near it as well, but through various events she actually gets a job there to clean the house for the heir that lives there. And it turns out that there is definitely something weird going on with this house, and it actually is linked to her own family's past. Now, this is a book that many of you have recommended to me, and a lot of you have told me I'm gonna love. And it was a book that I had a feeling that I was gonna like, but you were actually all right. I loved it. This was perfect for me. A gothic atmosphere can really do a lot for me in a book. I love a book with like a dark and gothic vibe to it, and this has that in buckets. I also really like these kinds of fantasy books where it's set in our world but it has like supernatural elements in it, and that worked really well for me in this as well. And I really like both the setting of the town and this house. The house has a really interesting feel to it. It's very dark and spooky, but it also has like a whimsical edge to it. And the town just feels kind of dark and grim and sort of run down and haunted in a way. I also thought the story was just really engaging, and I loved learning about the lore of this house. We actually get like different versions in a way of the story of what's actually going on, and through that we sort of get to the bottom of it, and I really enjoyed that. It has like a dark fairy tale vibe going on in it, and it is quite dark, I would say, and it is a little bit spooky, but I just loved it. Like, I could not stop reading this damn book. Now, a big thing for me when I'm reading books is the characters, and I really liked reading about the characters that we meet in here. Our main character in particular, I thought was really interesting. I like reading about complicated and complex characters, and I feel like she fits into that quite well. She's not always super likable, and sometimes you don't agree with her, but you understand where she's coming from. And she's just a little complicated and kind of jaded in a way, but you understand why she's like that. We also get some like bits where we get the perspective of the heir of the house, and I really enjoyed reading that as well. And I really got roped into their like thing, and it takes a lot to get me into these kinds of things. But I was in when I was reading this book, and I kind of loved it. So yeah, I just really like the characters. I also actually really like the side characters and how at least some of them add a little bit of relief to the story, because it is quite dark and there are some humorous moments with the side characters which I do really like. I will say though, even though I love this book, it is one of those books that I could see is probably not for everyone. It is a little bit slow at times, which I actually really liked. I felt like it fit the story, but I can understand that some people might not like that. I think it's the kind of book where the horror is more like the vibes. Sometimes there are horror moments as well, but like it's more of like an atmospheric kind of thing for the most part. So if you want straight up horror, maybe this one isn't the one. And I do think you sort of have to be the kind of reader where atmosphere does a lot for you to really get into this, because the atmosphere is like the most amazing part of this book, I feel. It's one of those books where when I finished it, I read some reviews and I could see like the people who didn't like this book as much, I would like read their reviews and be like, yeah, I do understand where you're coming from, but for some reason for me it all worked really well. I do think that the author is a really good storyteller, and it shows, and I am trying to be a little bit less stingy with my 5-star ratings, so I'm actually gonna give this 5 stars. It is one of those books where maybe it's not perfect, but it was perfect for me, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, I just loved this one. Like, the gothic house and the vibes were just chef's kiss, and I was just gripped, even by the romance, which is really saying something for me. The second book I read was Graveyard Shift by M.L. Rio. This is a mystery horror novella, and the story centers around this graveyard, which is in the middle of a college campus, and five strangers cross paths there every night for various reasons, and they've sort of gotten to know each other, and then one night they find a hole in the ground where there shouldn't be a hole in the ground, and they come across this man who puts something in that hole, which is very mysterious. And the story is basically about them trailing this guy throughout the night to try to figure out what he's doing, because it's obviously very sketchy. So I was excited to read this because it's ML Rio, and it just sounded kind of perfect for me, but I was also a little bit apprehensive because I've heard a lot of mixed things about this. And now that I've read it, I probably agree quite a lot with some of those mixed reviews. Mainly, the story that we do get in here is really intriguing, and the characters that we meet are very interesting, or at least they were to me. It's a very odd sort of group that comes together in here, and I felt like I got a relatively good grasp of the characters in a short amount of time, which I like, and the book kind of needs because it's very short. And I was very intrigued in the beginning of this because a cemetery for a setting will always get me. I also just really like the vibe of the book. I really like the setting and following this group and seeing different perspectives within the group on what's happening. And I do think that the mystery that we get in here is intriguing, and it did pull me in very quickly. So everything that I read, I really, really liked, and I was really into it. But the problem is, then the book just ends. Like, it's kind of hard to explain, but I feel like I've read half a book and I'm missing the other half. And it kind of feels like it doesn't have an ending. Obviously it does, but I just felt like it was missing something. I think another 20, 30 pages would have done a lot, but even if it was like twice the size, I think that would have worked even better for me, and I would have loved that even more. And so I can't help but feel like I sort of read something that wasn't totally finished, and it's very unsatisfying. So for me, this is somewhere between a 2 and 3 star read. Again, I really liked what I got to read. It just felt like there should have been more to it, and it does feel like I read half of something and I don't have the other half, which I would have liked to have because I would have liked to read more. So, yeah, I don't know. I liked it, but I just wish there was more of it. Then I picked up This Is How We End Things by R.J. Jacobs. This is a contemporary mystery, and it's set in North Carolina, where we meet a group of graduate students who are all studying under this enigmatic professor. And they are all studying the science of deception and lying. And the mystery is all about what happens when one of their tests goes awry, and a short time after, one of them is found dead. This was an interesting read for sure. I sort of went into this with medium expectations, I would say. I had heard that this had some dark academia vibes, which I always love, but I'd also seen that it had gotten some mixed reviews. But I just wanted to pick it up because I love dark academia and I was in the mood for a mystery. With this one, there are some things that worked for me in here and some things that didn't, but I would say while I was reading it, I was having a really good time. It felt like a very compulsive read and I wanted to keep reading, and it was very intriguing and engaging and sort of a fast read in a way. It's written in a way where it's very easy to keep going. So when I was reading this, I was very entertained. I always love following a group of students in a story, and I feel like the setup of how we meet these characters was really interesting, and I was interested in all of them. And there are a lot of different dynamics going on in the group, which I thought were very interesting to explore. There are a lot of characters in here though, and we are following a lot of different perspectives. And I do think that maybe because there are so many characters, not all of them felt that well-rounded to me. And in addition to these students, we're actually also following the perspective of a detective. So we have another character in here. And I think I would have maybe liked this a little bit more if we had just focused on like a few perspectives instead of getting so many different ones, because I think because of the way it's structured, a lot of the characters ended up feeling a little bit surface level to me, and I would have preferred if we'd gotten to spend more time with just a few. I think the one we spend the most time with is actually the detective, and that's the one that I liked the most. This might just be personal preference. Maybe I just like spending more time with a few characters, but yeah, some of the other characters ended up feeling kind of, I wish we had gone a little bit deeper into them. The book also lost me a little bit towards the end, in part because I think the red herrings we get in here are very obvious, and in part because I just expected this to have a completely different vibe towards the end. And maybe that's my own fault for expecting something else from this, but I felt like this was like it was going so well, and that we get to the end of this and it ends up kind of just being a very basic murder mystery, and even maybe a little bit obvious. And I thought that the whole thing with the students and what they're studying would tie into the end in a totally different way. Maybe I just went into this with the wrong expectations, but I just thought because of the dark academia thing and like what the students are doing, I thought this would just take us in a direction that I hadn't seen before, and then it didn't. So the ending was a little bit disappointing. I think maybe the disappointment is my own fault though, because I just expected this to take some totally different and unexpected turns. There's nothing wrong with how everything went in the end, like it all makes sense, but I just had expected something a little bit different, maybe a little bit more interesting and a little less obvious. That in combination with the characters feeling a little bit meh to me and kind of forgettable, this ended up being more of a middling read to me than I expected it to be. And maybe it's my own fault again because I went into this with higher expectations, but yeah, I did really enjoy it when I was reading it, so I was very entertained. And again, it's very compulsive and easy to read, so I'd say it's worth a read if you like these kinds of books. And the atmosphere and the setting does add a lot to this, so I really enjoyed that. To me, this is a 3 out of 5 star read though, and it's worth the read. I had just expected more from this. Next, I read Hemlock and Silver by T. Kingfisher. This is a fantasy horror book, and it follows a healer who is an expert in poisons. And the story starts off when the king of this fantasy land turns to our main character and asks her for help because his daughter Snow is dying and they cannot figure out what's going on with her. So as a sort of last resort, the king comes to her and she decides to help, and she goes to where the princess is, and it really is a mystery what's going on with this girl. And it turns out that the answers may have something to do with like this secret world that you can find in the mirrors of this house, but this world turns out to be kind of weird and a little dangerous. You know I love me a T. Kingfisher book, and this is one of her newest releases, so I was really excited to read this book. And actually, I want to show you what this book looks like without the dust jacket, because I didn't show you when I hauled this book, but it's beautiful. Like, look at this. It's so pretty. I always read books without the dust jacket because I don't want to damage the dust jacket, but I very rarely look at them before I actually read them, so this came as a surprise. This also has the, like, I think someone commented the other day that the author illustrates like the end papers, and they're always there in the first editions of the books, and this fits quite well with like the vibe of the story. Now, this author does a lot of retellings, and this is technically like a retelling of Snow White, but I would say that it's a very loose retelling, and it's one of those books where like you can see where the inspiration comes from, and sometimes you come across things and you're like, oh yeah, that's why that's there, but it's not like super important. You don't need to know of Snow White to read and enjoy this book. I think I've said this before, but when I read retellings of things, I just completely disregard the fact that it's a retelling. Like, I don't really care how close it is to the original or not. Like, I don't really mind either way. I do think maybe if you're looking for like a retelling that's very close to the original and you want to read a retelling of Snow White, I don't know if this is the one. I really enjoyed this book, just like I always do with this author. This has a very like similar tone and vibe to her other books, so it's no surprise that I really enjoyed it. I really liked meeting the characters in here. We have an interesting main character, but as always, kind of with this author's books, I especially loved the side characters. We spend quite a lot of time with this guard in here and a talking cat, which I just love. It's kind of talking, it communicates in a way at least, and this cat has a lot of attitude, and I love that. And with this author's books, I always enjoy this like mix of dark and spooky stuff and more like humorous vibes, I guess. I also like the mystery of what's going on in here. I thought that was really interesting. And I do really like this mirror world that we get to see. And the things we meet in there were very interesting and a little spooky. I would say that the horror in here is more unsettling than anything else, which I really like. And there's even a smidge of romance in here, which I also quite liked. Again, I'm not always sold on the romance, but in this one, I did really like it. And I just think there's something about this author's books that I just always really enjoy. It feels like a break from everything else. And even though I've read quite a lot of her books now, and some of them are quite similar to each other, I just always really enjoy them. They're not similar in like what they're about, but in like tone and vibe, they are quite similar. Now, I will say, for me, I do think that the pacing of this one is a little bit off. I don't know if it's just me, but I felt like this took a long time to get going, and it almost lost me a little bit in the first third. I understand this like need to establish the world and the characters, but it was a little slow for me in the beginning there, and then the end did like it all ended quite quickly, I think. I don't know. I did really enjoy it still, but there were some things with the pacing where I was a little bit like, This is somewhere between like a 3 and 4 star read for me. It's probably more closer to a 4 star, and yeah, I really liked it. It's one of those books where like I think if you like this author's books, you would probably like this as well, and I'm really glad I read it. I still want to read all of this author's books, like I just enjoy them so much. Moving on, I finished A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid. This is a fantasy, mystery, romance kind of situation, and it's set in a fantasy land where this architecture student gets the opportunity of a lifetime to redesign the house of her favorite author who has just passed away. And this book of his is like super famous, and it's been her companion throughout her whole life, and it's given her a lot of comfort. She's kind of obsessed with it. And it's a big opportunity, but then she gets to this house, and the house is very weird, and there's something off about it. And there's also another student in the house, a literature student, who it turns out is there to try and expose the author as a fraud. So I have some thoughts about this book, and I'm not sure I've fully figured out how I really feel about it, even though, I mean, it's been a little while since I finished it. It's probably one of those books where some of the things in this book I thought were done quite well, some other things didn't really work for me, but I'd say overall I enjoyed it, but I didn't like it as much as I thought I was going to. This is my second book by this author, and the other book that I read by her, it's one of those books where like I really liked it, and I can totally see that other people don't, because the book is like almost 80% vibes. And I really enjoyed that in that book, so I figured I would love this book because I thought it would be kind of the same thing where it's like mostly vibes and it's dark academia, which I love. And I was thinking like this writing of this author and like the vibes and the atmosphere with the dark academia, I thought it would be like perfect for me. Now, to be fair, the vibes in here are actually great, at least I think so. The whole atmosphere of the setting was really, really good, and I loved how it was brought to life. It felt very gothic and sort of dark and damp, and the sea is like a huge part of this. And the house where we spend most of the time, I did really like. It was kind of unsettling, and I like the sort of lore of the house and the author and some other stuff that's going on, and how it sort of ties into the main character and some things that she's experienced, and how all of that ties together I did really like, especially how it comes together in the end. So I would say that the atmosphere and the plot actually worked quite well for me in here. The characters, though, I don't know if I'm really sold on them, to be honest. They are like, we're following the perspective of the architecture student, and then we're also getting to know this other literature student, and they are both university age, but at least the main character to me feels quite a lot younger, which I guess is okay. Maybe she's just inexperienced, but I don't know if I really felt like I got a good grasp of her, and I don't know if I really felt like I understood her or really liked her. And it's not like she's written to be an unlikable character, I don't think, because usually I really like reading about unlikable characters. But to me, she just felt like, it feels rude to say, but she felt very melodramatic to me and kind of annoying. And I didn't really like reading about her. And the thing is, the reason that it feels rude is that she is struggling with quite a lot of things, which then it sort of makes sense that she is the way she is. But I just felt like I could never really get on board with her, and some of the things that she does, I don't really understand. So yeah, I do think she's supposed to be interesting, but I wasn't really interested. I also didn't really care about the romance, but then I rarely do, so that's probably just me. I do think that there are some interesting themes in this book, which I liked. And again, the vibes and the atmosphere are like 10 out of 10. And I really like the writing of this author. I know, or I could see that it's not for everyone, but I really like it. Again, it's kind of like mostly vibes and atmosphere, so if you're not into that, you're probably not gonna like this, but yeah, I'd say this is like a 3 out of 5 star read for me. Some things worked really well, some things didn't. I loved the vibes, I really liked the plot, didn't really care about the characters or the romance, so yeah. I don't know. I liked it, but I didn't love it. There is a sequel to this, though, and I am kind of in two minds about whether or not I want to read that, because again, I loved the atmosphere in this and like the vibes, and I would be interested to see more of this world. I don't know, though. I would be interested to hear if any of you have read the sequel, but you also have to tell me if you loved the first book or not, because I'm interested to hear, like, either way, what you thought of it. I'd be interested to hear, but especially if you felt similar to me about this one. I'm wondering how the second book is. I'm wondering if some of the drama of the main character is different in the second book because of how this ends. But I don't know. I'll figure it out, but yeah. I do really like the cover of this, and the cover of the second one is also really pretty. So I'm trying not to get distracted by that, but yeah. I am glad I read it, and it does have dark academia vibes if you're into that. Second to last, we have another T. Kingfisher. It's What Feasts at Night, and this is like a horror fantasy novella, and it's the second book in the Sworn Soldier series. The first book is called What Moves the Dead, and in this book, we're following the same main character who is a retired soldier, and we're meeting them after the events of the first book, and they are going to their family's hunting lodge to sort of relax and recuperate, but then they get there and it is not as relaxing as they'd hoped. There's something weird going on. There's this like weird silence that is in this place, and the villagers are talking about this monster that comes out at night and steals your breath, which is obviously not great. This is quite a short one, so it was a quick read for me, and I just picked this up because I wanted something a little bit spooky, and I read this in like 2 sittings. Could have easily read it in one, but I just didn't have time. But I really enjoyed this, and I enjoyed seeing or meeting the characters again, and seeing what they got up to. As with the first book, I really liked the atmosphere of this, and I really liked the setting of it with this like lodge deep in the forest, and there is a very compelling mystery in here, I would say, and I like how it sort of comes to life in a way. It's kind of hard to explain, but I really liked it. It's sort of, again, unsettling, and there are some horror scenes in here, but I really enjoyed them, and I do really like that this author's books are like dark and spooky, but there are some humorous things in them that makes it a little bit lighter to read. I also really liked where the story went. I think we did a lot in a short amount of pages, and it is like the mystery and what's going on is very different from the first book, but I actually really liked it. I didn't really see it coming, and I just thought like the fantasy elements and how that was brought to life was actually really interesting. Maybe in the first book it's a little bit more exciting and sort of there's more action, and in this one it's very different, which if you've read the book that makes sense. But I actually really liked it. It was very spooky and unsettling. The whole vibe of this also has like a gothic edge to it, which I really enjoyed, and yeah, it was just, I was gonna say a nice little read. It was a spooky little read. I don't know how nice it is. There are some horror scenes in here that are quite unsettling. But I really enjoyed it, and I think I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5 stars, which is the same that I gave the first book. I still think the first one is my favorite, but I really enjoyed this one as well. And now I can read the third one, which I don't have yet. I actually don't know if it's out or if it's coming out, but I'm excited to read that. I don't know what it's about, but it follows the same characters, and I'm sure I'm gonna enjoy it. Then, lastly, I did a little reread of one of my favorite autumnal books. It is, of course, Garlic and the Vampire by Bree Paulsen, and this is like a fantasy graphic novel that follows Garlic, who is a very anxious garlic person who lives in a village of vegetable folk, and, you know, she's very anxious and nervous, but she's happy in her little village. And then a vampire moves into the neighborhood and someone needs to go check it out. And they decide to send Garlic because she has like natural protection because she's garlic. And despite her being very nervous, she decides to go on this little adventure. I feel like I've talked about this book to death, so I'm not going to talk about it too much because I mention it all the time. And especially this time of year, I will put this book into any video that I can think of because I just love it so much. So I mention this a lot, so I'm not going to go into it too much. Also because it's a reread and I have already reviewed this. But I just picked this up because I was having kind of a bad day, to be honest, and I just needed something to cheer me up, and I knew that this would do that, so I had to reread it, and I felt much better once I had. I think this is just adorable. I love the autumnal color palette in here. It's just a real treat to read, and I always say this when I talk about this book, but the way that the characters are drawn and the expressions, I just really, really like. It's not like the deepest of stories and probably not the most original, but it's very charming and wholesome, and I just love it. This is still a 5 out of 5 star read for me. It's just so sweet and lovely and adorable, and I feel like you can't help but love Garlic in here because she's having a time and she's just trying her best, which, like, aren't we all? And I don't know what it is about this book, but every time I think about it or I read it, it just makes me feel better. So I just love it. Alright, that was the last book. Those were all the books that I read in September. Now, I'd love to know what you all have been reading lately, especially if you've read something autumnal or spooky. Tell me all about it in the comments. As always, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!